Imagine training for a marathon your entire childhood. You buy the best shoes, you follow the strictest diet, and you clock thousands of miles because you were promised a gold medal at the finish line. Then, the moment the starting gun fires, the organizers tell you the race is actually a swim. Also, you now owe them money for the sneakers. That isn't just bad luck, that is a recipe for a collective nervous breakdown. I'm talking about the millennial experience, specifically the cohort born between 1981 and 1996. If you think this is just another rant about entitled kids, I need you to pause and listen. Because here on the Quiet Pressure Sketchbook, we need to talk about why this specific group acts the way it does. We are witnessing a historical anomaly. Millennials are the first generation in the modern era projected to end up poorer than their parents. Isn't an opinion that's the cold hard data coming out of major institutions like Pew Research. So you have millions of people carrying around a heavy invisible burdens, a deep-seated sense of failure, because they can't replicate the standard of living they grew up in. It's a psychological pressure cooker. You spend 18 years hearing that the world is your oyster, only to step into the real world and find out the oyster costs $1 million and you're allergic to shellfish. Psychologists call this specific kind of friction cognitive dissonance, and it's become the background noise of millennial life. But it gets darker than just checking your bank account. Dr. John Twenge, who authored Generation Me, highlighted a disturbing trend. While this generation scores higher on traits like assertiveness and self-focus, they are simultaneously breaking records for anxiety and depression. Creates a paradox where people project confidence on the outside while feeling utterly hollow on the inside. It's like wearing a tuxedo to a house fire. Let's look at the timing because context is everything. Millennials were the guinea pigs for the self-esteem movement. They were raised in a bubble of affirmation, protected from failure by well-meaning parents who handed out gold stars just for showing up. Again, this came from a place of love, but then just as this group was entering adulthood, the 2008 financial crisis decimated the global economy. Bubble didn't just leak, it burst. They went from "you are special" to "you are redundant" practically overnight. That kind of emotional whiplash leaves a mark. Then you have to factor in the digital panopticon. Unlike Gen Z, who were born with iPads, boomers who adopted tech later, millennials came of age right as social media was colonizing our attention spans, had to figure out who they were as adults while simultaneously broadcasting that identity to the world on Facebook and Instagram. Research from Dr. Tim Kasser links materialism and external validation directly to poor mental health. When you treat your life like a PR campaign, your self-worth becomes dependent on the audience's applause. It's an exhausting, unending performance. This brings us to the concept of suspended animation. Millennials are pushing back major life events, marriage, buying properties, starting families, not because they don't want them, because the math doesn't work. The desire is there, but the capital isn't. We talk about this a lot on the Quiet Pressure Sketchbook channel. The feeling of waiting for your real life to begin, but instead of a house with a white picket fence, staring at a rent hike and a wait list for therapy. This state of limbo creates physical stress. It's called allostatic load. It's the wear and tear on your body that comes from chronic low-grade stress. The biological cost of bracing for an impact that never ends. Feels like you're sitting in an airport terminal, clutching your ticket, but the flight keeps getting delayed by another hour every hour for 10 years. Let's dig into the broken promise of meritocracy. The script was simple: education plus effort equals security. That was the social contract. The terrain shifted violently. Millennials followed the rules, took on the loans, and earned the degrees only to find that the value of that degree had plummeted, while the cost had skyrocketed. They entered a gig economy that stripped away benefits, offered hustle culture in their place. When your lived reality completely contradicts the fundamental truths you were taught, you experience schema disruption It shatters your worldview. This is why you see that strange mix of hope and bitterness. Millennials want to believe the system works, but they have the receipts proving it doesn't. And when older generations criticize them for job hopping, missing the point entirely. Loyalty was a transaction. You gave a company your life, and they gave you a pension. That deal is dead. Millennials moving from job to job isn't fickleness. It's a survival strategy in a market that views them as disposable line items. We also can't ignore that this is the most educated and diverse generation to date, raised on the internet's infinite library. This created a skepticism of authority that is often mistaken for entitlement. When you grow up seeing behind the curtain, you stop blindly trusting the wizard. They ask why because they know the how is often rigged. Mental health is the final piece of this puzzle. Millennials normalized therapy. They took words like trauma and burnout out of the medical journals and into everyday conversation. That is a massive cultural victory. However, being hyper aware of your mental state while living in an environment designed to crush it, double-edged sword. They are trying to heal while the world keeps inflicting new wounds, unsustainable housing markets, crippling debt, climate crisis that hangs over everything like a storm cloud. It creates a unique form of existential dread. They are being asked to save a planet they don't own and fix institutions they didn't break, all while running on empty. So when you see a millennial stressing over a grocery bill or sounding cynical about the future, understand that this isn't a personality flaw, is a rational adaptation to an irrational environment. They are navigating a map where the roads have been erased. If you're trying to sketch out your own path through this chaos, that's exactly what we do here at the Quiet Pressures Sketchbook. This analysis resonated with your experience. Please subscribe and consider joining the channel to help us keep these conversations going. I appreciate you watching.